Alright. Hello. I'm back from an extended hiatus on patch 10.5, although tomorrow I believe is going to be 10.6 on the North American server. In the Tier 8 aircraft carrier, the Graf Zeppelin, this is the B variant. Now, the rocket changes have gone through at this point, and as a carrier with high caliber, high I don't even know what you call it. Let's say large size, high explosive rockets. The Graf Zeppelin is one of the big losers of the rocket reticle change, since she now suffers from a significant delay to her launch. This does mean that her primary anti-destroyer tool of the HE rockets, which while inconsistent could hit quite hard, is largely marginalized. However, it doesn't stop her from making use of the rockets still against larger targets. There is some significant lead-up time, about 4 seconds, uh, bridging on 5 seconds actually, for both the rockets on the Graf Zeppelin as well as the Tiny Tims found on the Saipan and the Midway Tiny Tim loadout and Lexington Tiny Tim loadout. And this 4-second delay, along with the relatively low volume of rockets, does mean that it is quite difficult to use them against lighter targets like destroyers as you would formerly. So unfortunately, even though the Graf Zeppelin retains her excellent low-speed handling on her rockets, well, it's largely moot because you don't really make use of that low-speed handling versus larger sized targets that you will now be more likely to be striking. Nevertheless, still going to scale with my rocket planes. They are now largely expendable. A target like this Friesland, for example, is going to be extremely dangerous, but I don't care anymore because my rockets are kind of worthless. So you can see him turning in here already. There's that lead up time. You can see my planes are invulnerable, at least during the attack. He actually turns in and I actually do manage to score some damage on him miraculously. So there is that, but you did see that significant delay in actually releasing the rockets once I decide to arm to strike. So you do have to kind of keep your head on and think about where your hits are going to go. So the Graf Zeppelin still has the torpedo bombers as her basically primary armament, full health, full AA durability repop here. But I do have 4 heal charges to burn through, so I'm probably going to make this strike here because he is relatively exposed. But then there's this Hipper, on the other hand, who's a tier 8 cruiser with no heal, much more preferable. Don't want to hit that Venezia. I'm going to just go for a nice approach angle with as much of my boost bar as possible. So the Graf Zeppelin, of course, known for her high-speed aircraft of relatively low durability. He launches a fighter here. Give him a good lead time. He's turning in already. Zoom out away from the AA range and his fighter. See if we can score some hits. Hipper, a relatively slow cruiser. Okay, we do score flooding with that 1 torpedo. See if he turned. Let's see if he continued to turn inward. He's relatively straight at this point. 5.2. He takes another torpedo. Pretty stiff rudder on the Zeppelin fighter planes. Continuing to bleed that flood, so I'll take my extended flood time and just F out there. Nothing has changed there. Now, fighter changes have also happened with changes to the captain skills. That 4-point fighter skill is something you should be taking, probably, especially with those German fighters. Not quite the same as those tech tree German fighters, but still quite alright. And considering the Graf Zeppelin before, at least for me, I was taking just the 10% torpedo damage. It's a nice upgrade. Sadly, misses on that Hipper with those torpedoes, but you do what you can. This repub is extremely difficult to Citadel, which is why I'm reluctant to make a strike on him. With him penetrating so deep into my side, he is relatively exposed. So we'll just make a hit. I don't anticipate that I'm going to be able to Citadel him. Pulling down on the air brake right over him to get the most verticality. 2 penetrating hits, so not able to penetrate that extensive vertical protection on that French battleship, which are mostly difficult to Citadel unless you're playing something like the Manfred. French battleships tend to be much more vulnerable to high explosive armaments from carriers. The Repub being no exception with her 32mm plate. She elects to shoot me instead of one of the multitude of ships railing her right now, which is annoying, but not unheard of. I'm gonna go in. He's going quite fast. My torpedoes are quite slow at 35 knots. Puts another set of shells into me. Managed to score 2 torpedoes in and annihilate him, however. So we are losing on this side somewhat compared to the others. So I'm gonna execute a full turn, and there's a vulnerable Bismarck over there on the border. Now normally targets on the border are not too attractive overall, but thanks to the high sortie speed of the Graf Zeppelin planes, you can see me reaching 227 knots here, thanks to that bomber skill. Actually, I don't think I even have that, so it's just the stock speed. Reaching this relatively low HP Bismarck is not a big deal. Now you can see I am spotted by aircraft, the Indomitable deciding, or Implacable I believe. Oh no, it isn't Indomitable. Deciding that he'd rather hit me, which is fine. I can't actually do very much versus him, relatively speaking, unless I have that fighter plane skill, which I do not currently have. Just waiting for that free respec from the Captain Rework. You see the poor vertical protection of the Bismarck and German battleships in general, allowing me to get a nice hit over him. Venice actually has formidable short-range AA, so not too pleased to be spending so much time over him. No luck on the citadels there, but it is what it is. You can see him lighting me up with that fighter, kind of annoying, but thankfully none of his battleships are alive on this side anymore. So I'm just gonna let that happen since no one's really shooting at me, even in this tier 10 game. Marceau probably went through the center, I would imagine. And there he is. I'll light him up for my Ohio. Now Marceau, unlike the clobber, the tech tree sister, does actually have some decent AA and access to a defensive fire. You can see those red tracers showing that his defensive fire is active. Gonna give him a nice lead up, 35 knot torpedoes versus a 40 knot, probably 50 knot Marceau. Okay, that was not even enough there. Tagging onto that Indomitable fighter there because he's apparently over the horizon. He's gonna abort mission there. Dugin Petropavlovsk has 50mm plates. I only have 40mm of penetration because unlike the full-on Tiny Tims, the Graf Zeppelin rockets only have 40mm pen. Have to take care moving into this position. The Repub has been dispatched from the center, but still in North Carolina with extensive range in the center. So the rocket changes overall make my pretty much every carrier's destroyer matchup a little worse, unless you of course were already only using armor-piercing rockets, in which case, well, nothing really changed. The delay in firing on armor-piercing rockets is fairly minimal. Approaching into the Petropavlovsk's long 6.6 kilometer AA aura. He has a defensive fire. You can see those hot red flags. Do manage to penetrate, however. You can see that long delay. Finally, the rockets release, and I get one hit into the stern thanks to the relatively low number of rockets fired. Which is a bit tragic, but it is what it is. 12 torpedo bombers left on deck. We know the Petropavlovsk popped his defensive fire. Pretty low at this point. Not too many vulnerable targets. As you can see there, that delay made it so that even though I aimed for his midsection, a fairly slow moving Petropavlovsk ended up hitting him on the stern. Okay, I believe I was supposed to arm there, but I was not paying attention. But that's quite alright. Petropavlovsk is quite spotted. So we'll loop back out. Can I get a nice lineup? Don't quite have time for that, so we're gonna surge in full speed. Slow torpedoes, but the Petropavlovsk is not too slow, or not too fast. So we're gonna get some hits in. Just one, because he does turn in, unfortunately for us. And there's that Dugin Shimakaze now. He's fairly static, but remember, we have that large delay, so we're gonna need him to kind of sit still if we're gonna want to hit him with these. Normally, though, if he doesn't have smokescreen, and with his AA on, so I have plenty of time to anticipate his motion, he would be quite vulnerable. Moving quite slowly. so we'll see if I can anticipate the hits. 2, 3, almost 4 seconds there. You get a defended ribbon. And you can see the maneuverability has not changed at all, like I mentioned. This time he's moving at speed, so you're gonna have to try and aim and anticipate where he's gonna slide. You have to use a bit of your intuition there. Pretty lucky dispersion on the rockets, allowing me to get some hits in. Slowing to a stop behind that rock, looks like. And my ships on this side have very rapidly disappeared. Let me just pop a fighter here, so that my secondaries can have some spotting. He is in secondary range, but don't have too much of an angle. No hits on the Eugen there. My allies already dispatched the Shimakaze, however. And I make my way around the corner once more. Use that Shimakaze smoke prior to his death against his allies. 3 clean hits into the Eugen there. And the Eugen, as a German cruiser, also has fairly poor vertical protection, just like the battleships. Torpedoes inbound. Either they hit me or they don't at this point. I'm gonna try and finish off this Eugen. He does manage to get a hit. I dispatch the Eugen, which buys me some time to deal with the North Carolina. My team thus far performing somewhat poorly, considering I am a bottom tier carrier. But that's to be expected these days. Just can't trust your teammates to really accomplish very much as I dive onto this North Carolina. He's turning in, so just gonna abort that strike now. We managed to hit him with 1 on some part of the nose, more than likely. Ohio continuing to run it down through the center. I have a full rocket squadron, so here we can show off against the 32 and 38mm plates of North Carolina. Hoping to maybe get 2 strikes in. I'm going to lead the nose section. You can see he's maneuvering quite readily. And I don't have that much control, so aiming just in front of his nose, it's the midsection of the ship. As you can see there. Don't have too much control over where the rockets hit overall, as you can see. Pretty nice section hit there. Got a double fire. You have to excuse me. And that should allow me to accumulate a bit of damage. It's probably going to turn in, but hopefully that relatively impressive North Carolina rudder. Maybe I can force him to turn in, and that way he might take those Nevsky torpedoes. So I lead quite outward, retaining some space. He decides to take my torpedoes, and manages to dodge the Nevsky torpedoes, unfortunately. North Carolina has significant vertical protection, but should be citadelable, theoretically. Running out of aircraft to deal with him. 5 torpedo bombers left. The Graf Zeppelin, of course, suffering from being a bit of a secondary ship in this case. North Carolina nice and lined up though on this rock, means I should be able to make some repeated strikes. Can't tell if he's quite beached. Looks like he's mostly stuck. I'm just gonna release those there. hopefully manage to score 3 hits, and that together with my Nesky will allow us to dispatch him. Now I probably need to move from this position at this point. Remember, I can't defend myself against the Indomitable. Just the Hipper and the Indomitable left. Over there. Now it's going to be difficult for me to defend myself against the Indomitable, since it is an Indomitable after all. I have plenty of fighters left, but I don't have that fighter skill at the moment. So I'm going to drop myself some fighters. But since I don't have enhanced reactions on this captain, it's going to be somewhat difficult for me to deal with this. You can see it showering me and quickly one-shotting my non-saturated hull, unfortunately, in this circumstance. Nevertheless, with our last strike in this game, which we will probably lose, although Wisniewski could kill everyone, technically. Drop a fighter here. So there dispatches. And low HP Hipper. So there is still a chance that we can no-cap kill all this. So I'm waiting to see where he's gonna go. I definitely have enough strike power here to kill him, but unfortunately it looks like he took a big chunk from the Petropavlovsk in that last engagement, so he's gonna die, but it is what it is. So still a pretty decent performance, but you can see the rocket's efficacy has been somewhat significantly reduced. Not the best team, but it is what it is, like I said. So we'll throw it back. I'm still running that secondary build. Overall, I wouldn't change too much in this build, but I'd probably move these torpedo bomber points over to enhanced reactions, and then finish up with a one-pointer there. Furious loss from earlier. Now this enhanced reactions is an excellent skill, and I basically recommend it in almost all circumstances. The very few small niches where I don't take it is when I'm playing carriers heavily specialized into strike packages in random battles formats. In competitive, it is very important to be able to protect your allies, so even on a carrier like the Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or Franklin Delano Roosevelt rather, the FDR, a rather hefty strike carrier. In competitive, even then I would take this enhanced reaction skill. It's very important, and you couple it with this one-pointer search and destroy in most circumstances. So for my Graf Zeppelin, I just move this proximity fuse over to enhanced reactions and finish off with a search and destroy. And that would be a fairly standard Graf Zeppelin build, or fairly standard build for any secondary focused German carrier. Now, of course, if you're not on Graf Zeppelin, just move the 4 pointers from close quarters expert over to, for most German carriers, probably bomber flight control. And you have that as a standard build. Just waiting for the free respec for the captain points reworks, however, so I'm just going to stay on this relatively strike-focused package for the iteration of random battles as we head back in. Otherwise, nothing else has changed. I wouldn't say I've been playing less carrier because of the changes. The changes overall are fairly alright, although I do despise the alteration of efficacy by balancing through increasing RNG, but overall it's a good change. It does make basically all rockets worse against light targets like destroyers, and that is probably something the game needed overall, so I'm alright with the change. So on this match we are middle tier, so we're in a 7 to 9 rather than being bottom tier at 2 to 8. Not too much in the way of AA monsters, and in fact there's a couple of tier 7s to bully, so hopefully this game can go a little better than the last one. So leading off with my torpedo bombers, this time on this somewhat larger map on Islands of Ice. Looking to just find an early target to kind of pick on. Hopefully one of the tier 7s now. There's no problem with attacking higher tier ships, they do give higher base experience for you. But early on. Strasbourg and Bismarck. This is a pretty good formation right here. I'm gonna go after this low tier Strasbourg, I think. Diving a bit through the Bismarck AA, but we have our heal. Bismarck does launch a fighter as well. Strasbourg quite fast. Sister ship to the Dunkirk. Alright, don't quite get my lead up right on these 35 knot torpedoes, but we have plenty of HP and time to make a second strike. Let that reticle narrow. Doesn't have too many options here. Last gasp refilling my boost. Nice easy lead up there. And because the Strasbourg's individual AA is so low, and because there's this mountain to shield me from AA, with the Bismarck, I can make this last strike with the 2 torpedoes remaining on deck. And we should get a nice clean opening. Could have been a bit better if I landed my first salvo properly, but it is what it is. And a nice 24,000 opener on a poor tier 7. You can see even with the fragile planes of the Graf Zeppelin, versus low tier ships with lesser AA, still quite a formidable platform. To be careful with my enormous Graf Zeppelin detection of 15, was it 16.7? 15.7? 15.7. It's been a bit. Jutland has fairly low AA, but a good smoke. That's its usual defense against carriers. Now, in past times, this would have been a very nice situation to find myself in. Jutland by itself. He's accelerating still, so gotta give that 4-second lead time. Oh, looks like he did manage to slow down in time. Managed to put some hits into just the tip of his bow, flying in an unideal pattern over the Jutland again as I make a strike on the visible Surrey. Now the Surrey does have a heal, so it's going to be relatively low value. Looks like he's doing quarter speed, so I'm going to not lead too much. 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds. Nice straddle for 6k, so as you can see, the rockets still hit very hard when they do impact. It's just a matter of getting them to land accurately. Destroyer inside of A, relatively undetected. That's not the Jutland or the Schultz, so it's Vanklin or Z-23. Surrey is spotted and gliding through the center of B. My destroyers seem to have no interest whatsoever in contesting caps. We did get a fire onto that Surrey, so his damage control is down. We'll see how he turns. He either bows into the rock or he exposes himself to me. I'm gonna pop my engine cooling here just to get a bit slower, buy myself some more time before the torpedoes arm. So he does opt to shorten my torpedoes by turning in toward them, but that does expose him to the team. Pushes him out of cover. Just slide into the smoke. I'm just gonna leave as little room as possible. And then move on to nailing this Bismarck. Same as we did last time in the previous game. Do manage to score 1 torpedo hit, score a kill on the Surrey as all 3 torpedoes impact. There really wasn't too much room for him to maneuver, so fairly easy prediction. And we'll start on the Bismarck. Now the Strasbourg, like I said, French battleship, lots of vertical protections, so not the easiest to penetrate. Bismarck does launch another fighter. Bombs are still inconsistent, but as a lower tier French battleship it is possible we might be able to citadel him. We'll have to find out, I guess. But honestly, with Graf Zeppelin bombs, it's so random, it's hard to tell sometimes whether it's you, the bombs, or a little bit of both. So they strike the right area, but again, no sits. Wasn't really expecting any, to be honest. And the Z-23 did show himself on the map border. FDG and Bismarck at close quarters. Bismarck's probably going to go for a ram in this situation, considering it's a full health Frederica de Grosse. So I'm going to try and stop that from happening by just eliminating his engine. Oh, looks like he's stopped actually, interestingly enough, opting into the fight. Let me encourage him to actually participate. Bismarck dispatches him. Strasbourg is still up. Secondaries dispatched that. And Z-23 just left a smoke, as indicated by the fact that our hull was briefly spotted. Flying out toward this reversing Bismarck, you can see that slight indicator of the smokestack right there. And we're just going to make one strike here, so if we need to expend these 2 extra aircraft, that's not a big deal. Just evacuate them there. So you can see my hull is still spotted. He's probably proceeding south toward myself in the Al-Shari. He's not quite as close as the person is pinging, I would imagine. Otherwise we'd be in some real trouble. Probably more likely to be in this square that I'm searching now. As you can see. It's actually right on the cusp of my secondary range. And you can see those opening up now. Remember that 4-second lead time? Can I get the lead? Just barely skim the tail. I'm gonna duck behind cover though. I'm not actually too interested in taking the secondary engagement. I definitely could take a Z-23 before he kills me, but I have allies here, so there's no need to do that. Oh, I led as though this was still the old system. Of rockets, basically gave him fairly minimal lead time. Still getting used to it. As I said, haven't played too much carrier. This past season of clan battles, I played mostly cruiser actually, for various reasons here and there. So it is what it is. Again, that 4-second lead time causing me to miss the vast majority of my rockets. Oh, I'm in trouble. So instead of slowing down, I need to speed up because he's charging at me. Need to make sure I pull distance so I can actually dodge when push comes to shove. Torpedoes, I guess, become my more effective armament, but unlike the tech tree aircraft carriers of the German nation, I don't quite have the speed. Oh, turns out if I kept reversing, I would have dodged all these torpedoes. Instead, I'm going to take a large sum of damage. Now, he does have that AP, so I don't want to expose myself necessarily. Full broadside, even though I want to make use of all my guns. I want to leave that hydro range, though. If he wants to sit there, that's fine. He can shoot me once or twice and I won't die. I'm gonna go low, of course, but I just aim torpedoes at his last known location. Kind of hoping that saturation protects me here. Probably gonna die though. So I'm gonna take this squadron off. Secondaries, while accurate, still are relatively low in volume, so he's gonna scrap me, and that's fine. We are ahead enough that I don't think we really need to be in this game. Can help dispatch this Bismarck here. That Banklin's gonna go down. And now there's a very out of position Z-23 behind enemy lines. Not a huge deal. Give this Bismarck the good old flyby. Oh, we did tag a fighter. Score a kill while we're dead. Looking for my next target. Maybe we can finish off that Scharnhorst. Don't know if I have enough speed boost to actually get onto the target, unfortunately. Not going to be a very clean strike, I'll tell you how much. Still have a heal charge, which is why I'm not too afraid of all these fighters and AA and such. Only have 2 torpedoes now, but still do manage to make the drop. Oh dear, he's very slow. He might take that 1 torpedo on the bow, however. Not quite enough to finish him personally, because I didn't get a flood, but it should help my team dispatch him, since he slowed down to dodge for some unthinkable reason. And we're gonna end up just shy of 100,000 on this match, but I will take it, honestly. and see me basically hounding after these heavier targets because the rockets are so ineffective, relatively speaking. So it's just more efficient for me to spend my time against heavy targets. So Wargaming kind of forcing me to use my rockets in other ways other than direct damage onto destroyer hulls, which honestly is probably healthier for gameplay patterns, although the whole idea of spotting with planes is honestly more significant of an impact than anything else than the annoying but relatively less significant direct damage that rocket planes were able to deal. I'm not saying that rocket planes didn't deal ridiculously absurd amounts of damage to destroyers before, but it's just that the spotting is for overall game health purposes is much more significant in terms of the higher skilled destroyer players versus having their stealth kind of ruined by the carrier's global presence. So this one's going to play out, but yeah, not too much to say here. Graf Zeppelin obviously one of the big losers of the rocket delay changes, but I mean, what can you do? That's how the game changes, and you just have to roll with the changes. Sometimes you can't really get things done by just complaining. But like I said, take enhanced reactions. It's a great skill. Basically, should just run it on every carrier once you find room in your build. When you want to take it is up to you. If you want to take it as your second 4-point skill and want to opt for damage on your first 4-point skill, that's fine. Or if you want to take it first, that's fine as well. On the Hakaryu and Japanese line in general, I know. It's nice to start off with the torpedo damage, because torpedoes are such a significant part of your kit. But then moving on at 17 points to enhance reactions, and then at 18 points to taking the 1-point skill to extend the radius of your fighters is a very easy way to go. Anyhow, I'm going to wrap this up here. This is a pretty long video, all things considered, since we did play 2 matches. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you all later. Cheers.